Let's take a look at the N64 version of the game, shall we? I apologize for the jitter and the lack of sound. These are emulation issues. Technically, the sound does work, but it lags so badly, even when the video is running smoothly, that it makes it almost unplayable. That's right, I am emulating this. I couldn't find a cartridge for a reasonable price. They're pretty expensive these days on eBay. Around $30 for a loose cartridge, 70 or so for one in a box. Looking at good condition, 150 plus, and then if you happen to come across a sealed factory copy, you'd be looking at over 700. So this game was developed by Factor 5 of Rogue Squadron fame. It's one of the very late gen N64 games. One second here, got to think up something to describe this game. Yeah, this seems right. Yes, unfortunately, while the game is present 100% in a playable state, it is riddled with errors and bugs and just various issues. Now, the reason I'm emulating this again is, as I said, I couldn't find a cartridge in a reasonable price or condition, but it's tricky to get emulating. The standard emulators do not work for it. Supposedly, one does with a whole bunch of plugins. I couldn't get it to go. This is a unofficial, hacked out, unsupported release of another emulator that runs this game and only this game, and it requires a PAL cartridge image, which was never released, but the image leaked online a few years back. Once it runs, though, it runs pretty well. I'm getting a bit of slowdown and lag here because my computer is not a powerhouse. N64 emulation is still very taxing. As you can see, though, things look very much the same. But right off the bat, you'll notice a difference. There's no deadly jumps to start off our gameplay. In fact, things are simplified quite a bit. Indy automatically grabs to ladders. With the analog controls, he moves pretty precisely and fast. He climbs everything. Just in general, actually, all of his actions are a bit smoother and faster. Another big improvement is once you grab a block, you can just keep pulling it as long as you like, as opposed to in the PC release where you had to stop and release after every pull. It's a minor thing, but it helps. I'm basically going to be taking the exact same route through this level that I did when I played the PC version, just to show off all the differences and the similarities. As you can see, our first treasures here. There's still 10. They've been moved around a little bit, a couple of them, and just put into different places. You see, the first big issue here with the N64 version is the camera. It's much worse than the PC versions. You kind of have a button to center it behind any at all times, but otherwise it pretty much just wildly flies around and is totally unhelpful. Um, I had a lot of trouble getting lined up for some of these jumps, but once I was there, it was smooth. In the PC videos, you'll sort of see me wander around and not really run in straight lines, and that's because the controls don't quite work. In this, I had a much easier time just keeping straight line. This is sort of a director's cut in many ways. A lot of the levels are different or changed. It has obviously the C system for items like Ocarina of Time, and it works very, very well. They added a lock-on for Z targeting and makes combat a cinch as opposed to the PC's sort of cumbersome thing. Here we go. You can just see I lock on nice and smooth to the snake. Accidentally hit the wrong button though. But two quick shots, very accurate. No fumbling around with, repeated shots on targets. The game looks pretty good overall. I think the poly count is slightly higher than on the PC. The texture work is not quite as good though. There's a few other graphical differences we'll see as we move along. I noticed they added this little cutscene here, letting you know that you could whip that thing. This was not present in the PC version. Also, you automatically take out your whip in a lot of these cases, which is nice. A little more slowdown. I assume if I had a better PC, a lot of this wouldn't be present, but definitely some of it is actually present on the N64. The same path as before, we just go back up and get that little treasure. Controls took me a second to figure out for the underwater. And the game still maintains its nice little touches, like Indy putting on his hat and everything. It's all just sped up a few frames. It's nice. And not having to stand in front of a ladder and press jump when you're absolutely squared on it is a dream. You'll see me struggle with that constantly in the main LP. But in this, you just automatically grab ladders and head on up. But there's something I've always found really weird about the N64, other than like everything, and that's how it did underwater lighting and texturing. It always had this sort of weird, surreal glow. But you can see that the treasure that was at the bottom of this pool is in fact missing. It's been moved, which kind of makes sense. It makes one of our later little bits a little more reasonable, I think, as opposed to just being a complete waste of time. If you hold down the Z button to go into targeting mode, you will still walk, and you can't walk off edges, just like the PC version. But by default, you are running around full speed because with the analog stick on the N64, things are, relative. Just get out of this hole, Indy. Things are, as much as it's much faster and kind of like a little easier to control, things are definitely not as precise, especially with that camera. See, I should have made that jump. I would have in the PC version. But here I had to, readjust the camera and get a little bit closer. And here again, I would have had that. Anyway, back to our long ladder climb. We don't really need to watch this. There we go. Love that speed up function. Anyway, up here is mostly the same, but the missing silver idol that was in the pool is now up here, making this loop back actually have a point in taking, as opposed to what I did in the PC version where it was totally pointless and I was just showing off the level design. You'll notice this thing is still a pain in the butt to get up on. And letting go is not quite as smooth. But let's dive back in and continue on to the dig site. A little more slowdown to contend with. I do apologize for that. There's a weird flash as I get out of the water here. I'm pretty sure it's an emulator error, but I do remember it making a big flash when I got out of here in the N64 version. Zindy slowly trundles over. We can get a good close-up look at his model. Something I noticed in this version as opposed to the PC version is that there's no lip flap. In PC version, their mouths move, and it looks a little awkward, but it's certainly better than just standing there sort of thinking to yourself like we have here. Otherwise, everything remains exactly the same for this part. I don't think there's any more major changes in the level. Everything else is pretty much cosmetic. You see these little scrub brushes around and little pieces of grass. Those were not there on the PC version. It's little touches like that that make the N64 version look nice. The biggest issue with it, though, other than the camera, is it's glitchy. Very, very glitchy. I'm surprised I didn't run into any at all during this short segment of gameplay. I thought I heard a trap go off. You get stuck in walls. There's just general crashing issues as far as I'm aware. Luckily, the game uses an autosave in this version, so if you die, you don't lose entire levels worth of progress. You just get set back to the beginning of wherever it did. I didn't die here because I know exactly what I'm doing. But other glitches, there's texturing errors all over the place. You'll see a little bit of jitter on character models. I definitely remember in the Tianshan River level having trouble with that elevator, as I mentioned in the main Let's Play. Overall, it's just not a very solid experience. If you had no other option, and if you were a collector of N64 games, no question, this is one you'd want in your collection. It is still a good game if you can fight past all the glitches. Now, the reason for its a bit of rarity is that this game was only released through Blockbuster Video in the United States and Canada. It was like a couple other games at the time period. I think it was Clay Fighter 63 and a third Sculptor's Cut, and there might have been one more in this era. But Blockbuster had some weird distribution deal, so you could only really get it as a rental in North America unless you ordered it from the LucasArts store. They had a catalog they printed every year, and it was available directly through that if you wanted a copy yourself to own. Most of the ones you'll see in good condition were purchased that way, I assume. They don't have the Blockbuster stickers and logos on them, but almost all the loose cartridges came from Blockbuster clearing out inventory. Anyway, we're almost done here. Just a few simple more jumps. Uh, have I mentioned how nice it is that Indy climbs so much faster and shimmies faster? It's really the best improvement in the N64 version, I think, other than the combat. As I said, though, if you had no other choice, play this one, I guess, if you have the actual cartridge. Emulating it is, as I said, a nightmare. It's not worth their time or effort. Uh, you'll see here I pop up the menu and it's completely broken. This is a crapshoot. Sometimes it's worked for me, sometimes it hasn't. But as you can see, it's pretty much identical to the PC menu. Uh, Couple things. It does potsherd, whatever that means. Got all our options, and as opposed to the PC, it does have custom menus and everything. Um, they're not working either right now. And things seem to be getting worse, so let's just hurry up and get the last treasure and get out of here. I like that this game actually keeps track of the relative values of all the treasures, and we've been doing it in the main game, but IQ stands for Indie Quotient. It is a throwback to, of course, Fate of Atlantis and the other puzzle games that kept track of your score that way. It's not broken in this, so I guess that's another improvement. Again, I'm not sure if that's broken in my version due to the, just Windows 10 issues or if it was like that to begin with. I don't think this version has a map, however. I couldn't find one, certainly. And it doesn't have a subtitles option, which sucks, because I like the subtitles and the nice little touches of everybody having their own color. This scene is especially jarring, with them just sort of waving their heads back and forth and thinking at each other. Without the lip flap, it's all a little bit weird. I know it was a limitation of the N64, but, I still find it jarring. But here's Sophia. Up close, you can see their character models, especially the arms and stuff, aren't looking too hot. Um, as I said, I think it's a little bit higher poly count overall, but you can see the texture work. Indy looks a little muddy. The game is looking pretty good. The emulator's doing some upscaling, obviously. It would look darker, a little muddier, and a little smaller on the N64 itself, but that would all be on like your, old CRT television, and it wouldn't really make too much of a difference. The conversation here plays out exactly the same. I think they dropped the line about godless communists in the dub, but I can't be sure. As I said, the audio is irrevocably broken. Uh, that's not the only thing that's broken, unfortunately. While I seem to have no real troubles playing through this level outside of some control issues and a bit of backtracking, you can't actually beat this game on an emulated copy in any way. You need to cheat to unlock all the levels and play them piecemeal one by one from the level select. At the end of every single level, the game will freeze. Uh, there's absolutely no way around it, and it's not worth your time or effort. In this day and age, especially with the good old games release, stick to the PC version. It's honestly a masterpiece. If you're an N64 collector, this of course does have to be in your collection, in my opinion. I'm not sure what the N64 collector scene is like these days, and if it's even worth looking into. It's available. This is definitely somewhat of an obscure game for the N64. It was supposed to come out in the UK at some point, but was totally canceled. That leaked ROM did appear at some point, as I mentioned before. Apparently, the UK version is less glitchy. So, if you had a way to dump that ROM image onto an N64 cartridge and play it that way, I guess that would be the best way to go about actually playing this game on hardware. Otherwise, though, I would think this would be a firm contender for the N64 Classic if we ever get to that. That along with Rogue Squadron are Factor 5's pretty much best games for the system. Episode 1 Starfighter, I was never a fan of. They did some really interesting thing with the coding for this game. The reason it's so hard to emulate is because it writes very low level code that can actually rewrite operational code for the game on the fly, allowing it to adapt to situations outside of its normal boundaries very quickly. This is, as far as I'm aware, the only company that figured out how to do this with the N64. And with the power of the expansion pack, they managed to make the game look really great. It's a shame the Western release was so plagued by bugs. Otherwise, I think this would have been generally considered a classic, up there with Zelda. Uh, so we fade off into the darkness, and of course the game freezes. And that's pretty much it for the N64 version. We might be back again to take a look at one more thing, but for now, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.